Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about two different things. First off, we'll be talking about the threat of some severe weather across the United States over the next few days. More importantly, we are going to be talking about this upcoming hurricane that is likely in the Gulf of Mexico as we go into the work week. And this could be a big hurricane and could cause some big problems to the United States. So we are going to begin with what's happening across the United States today and what's ahead over the next several days, beginning with the Great Plains and also back through the Midwest. This is an area that we do have a large storm moving through right now. There's lots of rain falling right now from Kansas and Oklahoma all the way back even into the Midwest, and we had some big thunderstorms yesterday, and several of them producing hail and wind, and we are going to see another round of severe storms today across the southern plains, and then eventually as we go into tomorrow, we'll be watching for some threat of severe weather in the Ohio Valley and Midwest, which we'll talk about here a little bit later in the forecast. More concerningly, we do need to talk more about this potential hurricane threat that could be impacting the United States as we go into the work week. Right now, the National Hurricane Center now has a high likelihood of a tropical storm developing over the next few days in the Western Caribbean Sea or even in the southern Gulf of Mexico. And the reason why this is concerning is because right now our area of development that we'll be watching for is going to be in the Western Caribbean Sea. And over the next several days, we are expecting this system to move to the north, eventually going to somewhere between Louisiana and Florida. At least that's the current forecast. And so this could be a big time storm, and if it's able to rapidly intensify, this could be a major concern for the United States, and this could be one of the worst hurricanes that we've seen so far in 2024 that makes landfall in the United States. Now obviously Beryl was a big deal, but that was only about a category 1 at landfall. This one could be potentially even worse than that, maybe a category 2, 3, or something even beyond that. Cannot be ruled out with how favorable the environment is in the Gulf of Mexico. We also have two other areas of development out in the Atlantic Ocean. This one out here is actually going to be, I think, a concern for the United States. A lot of ensemble members and long-term computer models are indicating that this could actually go more in the direction of the Caribbean Sea, and this could potentially become a threat for areas like Florida again as we go sometime into the beginning of October. Now, this is a lot more uncertain since we are just so far out, but we are also going to talk a little bit more about this if it does become a concern. Right now, we don't have any sort of low pressure system that has formed in the Western Caribbean Sea. It's just a disorganized area of showers and thunderstorms, but over the next 48 hours, we are expecting to see this organize more into a cluster of thunderstorms in the Western Caribbean Sea, and eventually, as we go into Tuesday or Wednesday, it's likely that we are going to start to see at least a tropical depression form, if not a tropical storm, and then eventually that'll enter the Gulf of Mexico sometime around Wednesday. Computer models have been fluctuating a ton over the last several days when it comes to intensity of this potential tropical system and also where it's going to track, so that's made it a very challenging forecast, but I do think there's more confidence growing on where this will be making landfall, or at least where this could be impacting in the Gulf of Mexico. So let's go and break down the latest data here from the GEFS ensemble members. This is essentially a group of different computer models all embedded into one graphic, and this will show you where this system is exactly going to be going with a lot of these models and exactly how intense this could get as it does go into the Gulf of Mexico. So beginning with late Monday night, right now a lot of the ensemble members have this developing at least into a weak low pressure system, somewhere around a tropical depression or even a low-end tropical storm. Once we go into Tuesday afternoon and evening, this starts to intensify pretty quickly with a lot of the ensemble members, and that's a big concern. The faster that this can organize and intensify, the greater concern we are going to have here in the United States for potentially an intense hurricane. It can't be ruled out that this could be the most intense hurricane that we've seen make landfall in the United States so far this year. Now, as we go later into Wednesday, as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to be moving into a very favorable environment with very warm water temperatures, not really much dry air at all, and most likely low wind shear, which would allow this thing to really quickly organize into a stronger hurricane. Now, the ensemble members, all those numbers that you're seeing on your screen here are pressure numbers, and essentially it's the last two digits of pressure. Some of these are down to 956 millibars of pressure, which would be a very strong hurricane, but a lot of them are still in the range of 980 millibars to 990 millibars. So there's obviously still a large spread when it comes to the intensity of what this hurricane could be upon landfall, but there is a high ceiling that this could become, again, a more major hurricane for the United States. Now, this is, again, late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning. Notice how a lot of the ensemble members are in the eastern or central Gulf of Mexico. This would promote more of a threat for Florida as we go into Thursday and Friday for potential landfall and potential impacts like storm surge, hurricane force winds, flooding, rainfall, etc. etc. You name it, basically those will all be in play in Florida. Now, there are still a few ensemble members that do bring this a little bit further to the west, which could be a possibility. Since we don't have a low pressure center yet, we don't know for sure if this will be going towards Florida, but I would say the confidence is definitely growing that this could be a more of a Florida storm more than anything when it comes to hurricane impacts. By Friday morning, ensemble members are varying anywhere from, being up into South Carolina by Thursday night, or even as far south as still the Gulf of Mexico. So there's also a timing discrepancy here as well, where this might be much further to the north by Thursday night, or it could still be in the Gulf of Mexico Thursday night pending landfall. So there's definitely something to keep in mind there. This might make landfall literally anytime between Thursday morning all the way up till as late as like Saturday. That's the timing that we're looking at this point. By Friday morning, a lot of the ensemble members at that point have this making landfall, and then a couple of the outliers keep it in the Gulf of Mexico through Saturday and Sunday, which I think is highly unlikely at this time. And then long term, some ensemble members bring another big time hurricane into the Atlantic Ocean and eventually the Caribbean Sea, but there's a large spread here, and this is all the way into early October. We don't know for sure if this is going to happen. If you didn't understand what I just told you, I think this will put it into more simplistic terms when we use the GFS model and the European model. The GFS model showing a much higher ceiling, meaning a more intense hurricane, and then the European model showing a much less intense hurricane, which would be a lower ceiling. Now, this is what we're looking at as we go into Tuesday into Wednesday. Notice the GFS model has this quickly intensifying into a strong tropical storm and low-end hurricane by Wednesday morning. By Thursday, it moves to the north and actually undergoes rapid intensification, which is a possibility, so we need to keep this in mind. And then as we go later into Thursday, the GFS model continues to have this intensifying as it approaches the Big Bend of Florida. Now, again, this is just one computer model. Don't take this for a forecast. It's not a forecast. It's just a possibility. It's a scenario. But the GFS model basically brings this to worst case scenario for areas like Tampa, because we would get the worst storm surge most of the time on the southern side of a hurricane or on the eastern side. So a lot of that surge would literally just go into Tampa Bay. So hopefully this does not make landfall where it's currently indicating on the GFS model, but that is right now what we're looking at for a possible scenario as a stronger sided hurricane. And then again, this would be basically worst case scenario. It's not the guarantee here. It's just a possibility. I would still say it's a low chance, but it's not impossible at this point. Now, the European model does show a much friendlier solution, in my opinion, overall going into Thursday afternoon. This is when it starts to enter the Gulf of Mexico. Again, notice how it's a much less intense hurricane, but still has a lot of rain with it. That's going to be one of the biggest things, I think, with this potential tropical cyclone. And then once we go into Friday, eventually it makes landfall late Thursday night into early Friday morning as just a, middle grade tropical storm. This would be something much more doable, I think, for Florida, and it's also much further to the north near Panama City. So again, it's not worst case scenario that's guaranteed here. It's definitely a possibility that we could see something like the European model where this is only a tropical storm, but we want to make sure that you are prepared that there could literally be anything here. We could be talking about a tropical storm when this makes landfall. It could also be a category 3 hurricane upon landfall. Like, there's a big range here. So remember, things are almost certainly going to be changing over the next few days, so make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, as we are going to continue to post updates on this potentially significant storm that is going to be entering into the Gulf of Mexico here very soon. Slightly less significant, but something else that's important, is the potential for severe weather over the next couple of days across the United States. Today, we just have an elongated marginal threat from Texas all the way back into southern Illinois. Main concern for today will be damaging winds. There will also be an elevated chance for some hail back over north central Texas and even back closer to Midland, Texas, where there will be some hailstones that could be as high as the size of hen eggs today. Tornado threat very low to zero. Not really expecting much of a tornado risk today. Once we go into Monday, we have a marginal threat across Arkansas, back into Kentucky and Tennessee, where there will also be a potential for hail and wind. As of now, there is no tornado risk outlined by the Storm Prediction Center, but still wouldn't rule out a brief spin up. Both days are going to be full of just messy setups. Today, we're going to be watching for a cluster of thunderstorms across Oklahoma and back through central Texas. This will be mostly a wind threat. Eventually, this will approach DFW, but it will fall apart, I think, before then. Storms will still continue to produce some damaging winds and hail as they continue to move through central Texas, and eventually fizzling out as we go into the overnight hours and into Monday morning. And then things are looking relatively dry for most of Monday across Texas. Now, back over in the Midwest and also the Ohio Valley, there will be some storms throughout the morning today. These will be mostly just showers and thunderstorms, really not expecting much of any severe weather, maybe some low-end risk in southeast Missouri later this afternoon. And then once we go into tomorrow, things look relatively quiet until the afternoon, where a few storms will fire up in Arkansas, and these will eventually push into areas like Tennessee and Kentucky with a hail and wind threat, and again, maybe a brief tornado, but the risk does remain low. Other than that, there's not much else to talk about in in the weather world. I appreciate you watching today's video. As a reminder, we do have the potential for a tropical storm or hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico as we go into the week, and if this does become a concern and does make landfall, we will be most likely live for it here on the channel, so make sure that you are subscribed down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.